Go ahead and get started since we're at time. Welcome in. My name is Dr. Goodwin. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and several tools fall under that title. Some of them are more like lifestyle, diet, nutrition, which you've probably heard of before. Some others, however, acupuncture, hydrotherapy, and my personal favorite, herbs, are also underneath there. We're going to talk about some herbs that grow in the Ozarks today. Given that we're coming into winter, kind of late fall, we've only got a few to pick from, really. I mean, there are some that are roots that are underground. It's a little harder to identify those right now because they're underground, so you need to do those a little earlier so that you have time to see where they are. But we do have a couple that are still having some interesting or harvestable items around. So we'll talk about those. Before we crack into that, we're going to do a really brief thing on safety, because whenever a small mistake can lead to a big consequence, we want to make sure that we're going to be safe. Eating random plants is one of those things. So, safety tips will go first, plants will go second, and then there are actually a couple cool events, a few that I haven't done before, that are coming up later this month, and on into the next year. So, for safety, there's actually a story that fits rather well with today. So, the basic tips, which I'll tell you first, and then I'll tell the story that tells the last tip. If you're on medications, sometimes plants will interact, because 90% of medications, 70 to 90%, originally came from plants. So it makes sense that those can interact. Number two, you need to identify your plant properly. If you learn all about the wonderful properties of plant, and then you eat something else, it doesn't really matter what you learned because you have the wrong plant. So you need to make sure you have the one that you think you do. And then third, there are plants, you need to be aware that there are plants that are dangerous. There are plants that are lookalikes to some of the ones that we'll talk about even today. Some people don't think that dandelion has lookalikes. It actually does. Thankfully, those ones aren't poisonous. But there are some other plants that people think, I know what that is, right off the bat. And they actually have poisonous lookalikes. So we need to do a little back checking, and that's why I always say have two sources. Double check lookalikes against two sources. Just make sure that you're not missing something that no one talks about. And then the last thing, I'll tell my little story here. So I was in med school, and I decided I needed some nutrition. I needed to get some fresh plants because I had been eating really bad because I was in med school where I learned how to eat well, but I didn't do it. That happened with more med students than you might think, aka all of them except for Brianna, bless her. She could cook really well. So I went outside and I walked around and I found a really healthy looking pine tree. And I was like, that's the one. This is close enough. I don't need to spend a lot of time. Took a bunch of needles, went inside, broke them up, and made some pine needle tea. We're going to talk about pine needles later today, but suffice it to say, they have some nutrients. Vitamin C is one of them. So I was going to be like, look, I have my natural tea and it'll make me feel better about myself. And so I put it in the refrigerator so it's steep overnight. That's called a cold infusion when you put it in the refrigerator overnight. Some constituents don't like heat. Vitamin C is one of them, although vitamin C will survive hot water. But I still put it in the fridge overnight. And then the next day, it was this beautiful amber color. And it had drawn out all the nutrients. And I poured myself a cup, and I took a sip. And one of the funny things about pine trees is every pine tree tastes different, even inside of the same species. And so I took a sip, and I was like, ooh, that's bitter. That is much more bitter than my favorite tree back in Arizona, or not back in Arizona, but another part of Arizona than the one that I was in Arizona when I did med school, so I didn't say back in Arizona when I was there, I say it now. And I took a sip and I was like, that is really bitter. Oh well, and I just knocked the whole thing back because I'm herbalist taste buds, you know. I woke up the next day with pain down in my abdomen, not good. And I was like, oh wait, oh yeah. They spray pesticides on the trees here. and I didn't check, and I pulled it off of an apartment complex tree, which is going to be sprayed by, you know, the apartment complex, and then maybe the city, and then maybe any of the people who are trying to kill the beetles or whatever it is that are going around pine trees. So it probably got, you know, like 14 different sprays, and it was one next to the street too. So I knocked every single check mark on the wrong side of the boxes. Did you yes? Did you no? I did lots of no. So the last safety tip, I had pain in the area for a while. It wasn't like stabbing, searing pain, but it was like, ooh, tender. I had some nerve pain for a good long time. I actually still am a little bit sensitive in that area. Can I prove that it was because of pesticides? No. But one day it wasn't there, one day it was, and I pulled it off of something that almost definitely had pesticides. So your last tip is know that where you're harvesting is clean and safe. You don't want to harvest next to infrastructure, power lines, main highways, that sort of thing, because they're going to spray those. Dirt roads, you can get get away with that a little bit more, but it's best if you know the area a little bit even then. People's lawns, people spray stuff a lot if they aren't quite nerdy enough about plants to do otherwise. And then the last one, water. Water we think of as supernatural. It's actually, there are very few waterways that are not polluted. And so if you're harvesting next to a waterway, you need to know that that waterway is clean. Because the plants, they will soak up the contaminants from the water. That's actually how they revitalize or whatever the technical term is, revitalize the water is they put plants to pick up all the minerals, and then they take the plants elsewhere and dispose of them, and then the water is cleaner. So you can use plants as a filter. You can actually get plants to be a good enough filter that you can filter water and have that be considered purified. And that's actually what we're going to talk about first. So our first plant is pine tree, which does have lookalikes. But I want to tell you about that filter because I'll be honest, I completely forgot about that filter story until I just started talking about it right now, and I'm super excited, so I want to tell you. So, pine trees, like, you know, mini plants, they're going to bring water up and down, and they have these really long tubes in their bark, in the xylem and the phloem, in the cambium. The xylem and phloem are the tubes, the cambium is the inner bark. And a pine tree, in case you haven't seen pine needles, here are some pine needles. So, sure, go ahead and pass it around. So, in the xylem and the phloem, you have the liquids that'll go up and down. Well, it turns out that the tree, if you take a branch, if you use the trunk, you're damaging the whole tree. But if you take a branch and you snip off both sides, those will still move water. Oh. And so you can put the branch into a bottle of water, and then you seal it with something that'll keep it from leaking, so it needs to be pretty tight. There's a few different ways of doing this. And then you can turn it upside down or to its side so that it's very slight slant. And it will draw water a little bit, but it's not going to be enough that you're going to be able to drink it unless you get gravity helping you a little bit. And the water will go through the xylem or the phloem, maybe both. I can't remember which one moves the water, which direction, but one goes up and one goes down. And it will move it to your next container. And they have tested that with microscopy, where they look for bacteria. None. The pores in the xylem and phloem, the little holes the water travels through between each tube cell that are all lined up sequentially, one after the other, those holes are so small, bacteria can't move through it. This is a defense mechanism that Mother Nature has put in these plants to make so that bacteria can't be transported throughout the whole tree without a lot of effort. And that's how it limits infection. That's why you'll see infection in one place on a tree and not the whole tree instantly. It's because it's segmented. And so you can get purified water by taking it. And usually you want to put the part of the branch that's towards the trunk and the ground in your feeding water, and then the water you're eventually going to drink, you want on the other end, because water usually is going to be coming up out of the ground and then down over there with the tree. So pretty dang cool. All right, but now we'll hop back into a couple other things about pine tree. So Pinus edulis, or any in the Pinacea genus, really. All pine trees can be used similarly. There are a few people who disagree with this, but experts that I trust say all true pine trees can be used similarly. There's one study out there where they fed like 14 bales of pine needles to cattle, and then the cattle had problems. Please don't eat 14 bales of pine needles. The pine tree has been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Its bark has been used, the inner bark, not the outer bark, has been used as a survival food by the Native Americans. They would take it, then they would steep it in water and let the sugars that build up in the winter especially go out into the water and dissolve out there. And then they would have pine bark tea, essentially. And with the needles, you can also make a tea. You have to be sure to crush them. The pine bark would also be ground up into powder. This was perhaps more common than the water method because having something to hold the water was a little bit more difficult than grinding it up and drying it. It was present, but it wasn't as easy as it is perhaps today. And they would grind it up and then they would eat it. It was a survival food because that's a lot of fiber for only a little bit of sugar. And it tastes piney, which actually isn't that bad. I actually like a good pine tree. Let's see, Ewell Gibbons, have you ever eaten a pine tree? Yes, yes, you will, I have. But pine trees were used as survival food, and they were used quite extensively by many, many tribes. It's not one or two tribes. So they can be used that way again today, but the way that we usually use them is the more refreshing way, I guess, a little bit less urgent. And that's pine needles. Pine needle tea. Pine needles can make a great trailside nibble. I've come across some that taste like citrus, and those are my favorite trees, where I take a nibble and I'm, ooh, yes, all right, I found an orange, and it's great. It doesn't quite taste like orange. It's orange and pine and maybe a little bit of lime, I think, was my favorite one. All that mixed together. It's just great. And so I would go back to that pine tree all the time. I probably didn't know enough at the time because that one was on one of my two, I went to two different undergrads. My first undergrad, I didn't know much about harvesting plants safely. I knew about identifying them, but that was on campus, so I probably got pesticides there too. But it tasted great.
It was just a different kind.
Yeah. So, thank you.
So are we making the tea with green needles? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent question. Vitamin C doesn't survive drying very well, so you want it fresh. You want green needles. The needles will hold on for a while, so it's not like you have to be same day. But you do need to crush them. If you don't crush them, they have cell walls. Plants have cell walls, and they'll hold on to all of their goodness. And they want to share, but they need to be, you need to let them know it's time. So go ahead and crush them up, and you put them in there, or you throw them in your water bottle and shake it up. You'll get vitamin C, but you'll also get something else that's not just nutritious. There's also a little bit of quercetin, which is good for allergies. I think you have to eat the needle to get that one, though. I don't know if that one comes out in water. Yeah, it doesn't come out in water. That's fat soluble. But the one that people don't always know about is one that they buy at Walgreens, actually. And it's just in pine needles and other places. Shikimic acid. Shikimic acid. That is Tamiflu. Tamiflu is a product that helps you fight back the flu. How does it do it? Well, zoom into the body and there's a cell and it's like, oh no, the virus is coming, and the virus is coming, and then the virus will attach to the cell, and as soon as the cell and the virus are stuck together, the virus sucks itself inside. Technically the cell helps it because it's confused. It's got a little receptor saying, friends, bind here, and the virus does, and in it goes. Now, what Tamiflu, or rather what shikimic acid does, is the virus is coming, the virus is coming, the virus is coming, and shikinic acid comes up and it looks like that receptor enough that it puts on little baby booties onto the virus, and then the virus will just bounce off the cell because all of its binders are covered, and so then the flu won't be replicating through you. And so it keeps it from getting inside the cells, and the cells are where more viruses are made. They hijack our equipment to go ahead and make more of those cells.
And that's eating it, or that's tea also?
Eating or tea, both
Both
work.
of those?
Shikimic acid
Okay.
is water soluble.
Okay.
Good question. So pine needle tea, not only is it nice and refreshing and a good trailside kind of way to get some electrolytes going into, it's also really nice to help keep back flu season. So, nice little bonus there. Now, when we are doing identification on the pine tree, I mentioned the unexpected, that there are a few lookalikes. And actually, some of them are quite poisonous. The yew tree, Y-E-W, is one of those lookalikes, and that's the poisonous one. So these are needles of the pine tree. But the yew tree used to be used by archers back in the medieval ages because it was nice and springy and it would release a really good arrow from the bow. Archers had unexpectedly short lives, and people couldn't figure out why. Just holding the wood over a long period of time, sweat from all of their intense work that they were doing, because they were launching these volleys of arrows. That takes a lot of work, and the sweat would make kind of a sweat tea around their hand, and that would extract some of the toxic components, and then they would go through the skin. And so over years, it wasn't like a month's thing, it wasn't even a decade thing, but it would take off the longer parts of their life. Over years, they would actually get toxified from this, and they would die decades early. And so the yew tree, the needles of the yew tree, if you don't know what you're looking for, they look like needles. And then lots of people say, needle equals pine tree. Needle doesn't equal pine tree. The yew needles are short, and they're a little bit fatter, and they're flat. And here's the foolproof thing that you can be safe with. What is that you see down at the base of those needles?
Like a capsule?
The capsule, a wrapping. Here, take a look. That wrapping, it looks like a little bit of saran wrap, a little bit of wax wrapped around the top bunch of the needles. Some pine trees have 3 needles, 5 needles, 8 needles, 1 needle, but even the 1 needle pine trees have that wrapping. And that wrapping is called a fascicle. And if a fascicle is present, you are safe. There might be 1 or 2 pine trees that don't have a fascicle, but none of the lookalikes do have a fascicle. So if it has a fascicle, it's a pine tree. So if you've got that wrapping, you're good. Another lookalike.
I don't think I saw what you were talking about.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is the important part. So see how right there's all this white stuff wrapped around the base of all those needles.
Okay.
Almost like a skin.
Yeah, kind of like a
Okay.
skin. I could peel it off if I
Okay.
scratched. That's the fascicle. And so if you saw something that looked like, let's say that's the base of the needle, nothing around it,
Right.
that would not be a pine needle because there's
Okay.
nothing holding it at the base.
Okay.
Are there ones that are dangerous lookalikes that are long, like a pine needle?
I don't know of any that are long. So long helps, but I wouldn't swear that there isn't one. Fascicle is something that comes from like different genetic code. And so it would be hard for a lost species to have that when it's in a different genus. And so I prefer that one, but no, I don't know of any that have not long needles, but I wouldn't rest my case on it. Another lookalike that surprises some people and other people are like, oh yeah, it surprises people in 2 ways. Some people are surprised, like, that doesn't look like a pine tree. And some people are like, I thought that was a weird pine tree. And so both make sense. It's evergreen. This is not a pine tree. This is juniper. Lots of people like to call it cedar. It's not a cedar, but that's okay. We can call it cedar if we want to. It's got these fronds that come out scaly, and the needles have all these off branchings. Usually, when they are young, they actually are needles, and they don't have the little off branchings, and they look a lot more like pine trees. And these also have some toxic species. Some of them are medicinal. Juniperus communis is actually really good for urinary tract infections, but identifying it as a bit of a beast, and I'm not going to go into that here, you need a microscope. Not a microscope, a lens. You need a lens. Or you need to know it just because you've been around it a whole lot, and it's all these things that are hard to describe. So not a pine tree. That is juniperus. And then this one might be communist. I can't tell without a lens. But, so that's another lookalike. Another lookalike of pine trees, spruce. Spruce has a square needle and no fascicle. You can grab the needle and then you roll it and it goes ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da. It's also a single needle and no fascicle. Look for multiple needles inside of a fascicle and you'll stick with pine tree. So, one other really cool thing about the pine tree. Native Americans relied on it not only for survival food. I'm not sure if they used the needles, but there's one other part that they did use. Anyone want to take a guess?
Besides the bark,
Besides the bark.
the cones?
The cones is a good guess. It's possible that some of them ate pine nuts. I haven't heard that yet. Pine nuts are really expensive for a reason. They actually take more calories to harvest than you get by eating them. And so, if they did use them, it was as more of a delight than a food source. But maybe they did. There's one other part.
The root?
Good guess. The pollen.
Oh.
Have you ever parked under a pine tree, gone in with a white car, and come out and seen a yellow car where your car used to be? Pine tree pollen is quite heavy. It doesn't carry with the wind quite as much, and it will come down and coat. You can get quite a bit. On the male cones, I think they're called catkins. Don't sue me if that's wrong. This is not a male cone, but I'm giving you, that's about the size of each of the little yellow, they're papery and yellow, not green. This is a bunch of juvenile needles that I'm actually pointing to, but that's about the size, and the shape sort of reminds me of it. I don't have a cone to show you, but they're those little yellow ones. On the female trees, you get the big cones. On the male trees, you get the little ones. And the little ones, if you tap them, yellow powder will just inundate out of it, and then you're going to get a nice little palmful. It might take a few to get a palmful, but there you are. And Native American braves, when they were going to go on a long journey, they would pull out a pouch, special pouch, and that pouch had pine powder in it. And then they would go ahead and quaff their supply of pine pollen. Because pine pollen converts to androstenedione in the body, which is a molecule, androstenedione, and that converts directly into testosterone. And it would give them strength for the journey. And so they would do a run and have the strength and the energy to make it and do a long, long cross-country run. They would also use it on days of battle. And I won't swear that it was in a pouch versus harvested on the way, but you get the idea. They would save it and they would use it on the day of the run or the battle. Pine pollen does in fact convert to testosterone, but the last thing, this is the part that like blows my mind. It's like, how did they figure this out? I do not know. If you eat pine pollen, it actually gets completely destroyed by our digestive acids. No use whatsoever. The Native American braves would hold it under their tongue. How did they figure that out? That bypasses the stomach acid and it goes into the large veins we have underneath our tongue directly into the bloodstream if you suck on it under the tongue. It's like, how did you know that? I want to go talk to some, but it's like, but it's true. And so pine actually has quite a few uses. Just make sure you get the right tree.
Have you heard of the pine needle soda?
Pine needle soda?
You
No, I haven't.
ferment it, you put pine needle soda and sugar in water, and you can let the yeast that's floating around in the air culture it, and then let it sit, and it'll ferment into a tea, and it'll have natural carbonation, because the yeast will give off CO2.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
And you
really
can make jelly and jam out of it too. I was just reading this last night, so funny.
Some people make jelly and jam out of everything.
Seriously, and syrup too.
Mm.
Those two things, yeah.
I wouldn't mind actually. Pine jelly sounds pretty good.
Yeah, right?
That offset of aromatic and sweet would be just really good.
Mhm.
Mental note.
You use the immature pine cones, they're when they're still green, and you boil them.
That would have a lot of resin.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of resin, pine resin was also used as, I believe pine resin was the one that they used as a chew. That one put a little mark next to. It's.
And I think they used it on boats too, to like seal boats, didn't they? I'm pretty sure.
That sounds accurate. I do know that it was used in a lot of medieval and Renaissance industrial age, like turpentine and a whole bunch of things came from pine through there. Water sealing. I know that it was a long list, so I would be 0% surprised if that was accurate. Yeah, pine's got a whole lot going for it. There was one other thing that I had. Oh yeah, the scent of pine needles. One of the molecules that does that is called alpha-pinene. And just the scent, this is one of the volatile oils that will go off into the air, and we smell that because it's off into the air. That smell has medicinal properties. Literally just walking through a pine forest is medicinal. They did a study, I believe it was with dementia patients, it might have been Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Dementia is kind of encapsulated in both of those. I believe it was Alzheimer's specifically. On mood and also on, might have had some mental function, but mood definitely. And by exposing them to pine scent, it made so that anxiety, which is a common part of dementia, was calm. And so, just scent. Also antiviral. So, pine trees got some kicking. There's 2 antiviral things that they use. Alright, so pine's got a lot going for it. I already showed you the fascicle in person, but here's a little picture with the fascicle circled. It's that little binder at the bottom. All right, so that's pine tree. Any questions?
What is flat cedar? It looks a lot like that. Flat cedar.
Yeah, a lot of people do call this cedar. Its Latin name is juniper or juniperus, but lots of people just call these cedars. It's because they look a lot like cedar, and they when settlers came over and saw them, it reminded them of the cedars that they had back in Europe. Botanically, it's not a cedar, but that's totally fine to call it one. Most people do.
That's juniper berry.
Yeah, this is juniper.
Flat cedar is a whole different plant.
Oh, well, I'm not familiar with flat cedar. I know that lots of people call juniper cedar.
Yeah.
Maybe flat cedar is a different one, because there are trees that are quite different
That's
from
kind
those.
of ornamental. They plant it in people's yards and stuff.
Oh, I'll have to look it up. I haven't heard about flat cedar
They
specifically before.
use it in sweat lodge because it smells so good. It has that effect, flat cedar.
Maybe it's got that same molecule in it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Alpha-pinene, I think, is found in, I don't want to say that. I know it's found throughout most of the pine, out of all the pine trees, but I don't know about other ones. But yeah, anytime you can pair aromatherapy with whatever else you're getting, it's a good day.
Is it aborti? I never can pronounce it. Aborti?
Arborvitae?
Yeah.
Oh.
Is that flat cedar?
No, that's not a cedar either. It's probably related in some way, but I don't know. Yeah.
There are a number of them that look a little similar. Well, let's move to our next one, so we got time to cover it. This, decide to fold up. This is sumac, specifically winged sumac. And I'll show future you because we're recording. There we go. Winged sumac. If you look along the main stem of the live plant, you'll notice The stem has little leaves coming off the side, just right there. See how it's hugging the main stem? See how there's those little wings hugging the main stem in between all the other leaves? It's these ones in the middle, between. That's why they call this sumac winged sumac. It's got the little wings that come off. And sumac, a lot of people, when they hear sumac, they think poison sumac. And everyone calls every single sumac poison sumac. There's only one poison sumac. And it grows where we always don't go. It grows in the middle of swamps and bogs, so you have to kind of slog to go find it. And then once you do get there, if you look at winged sumac and you look at poison sumac, then you'll notice that there's no wings on poison sumac. So that's one giveaway. The leaves look a little different too, but the real kicker, winged sumac and staghorn sumac and the other sumacs that are all friendly, they all have red berries. Poison sumac is polite enough to warn us with the near universal color of poisonous berry. Anyone know what that color is? White. White. There are only, I want to say, something like a half dozen non-poisonous white berries. So basically, if it's a white berry in North America, it's poisonous. There might be one exception, but don't store that part. Just don't eat white berries. And then, ta-da, you're safe. No poison sumac for you. So, winged sumac, or staghorn sumac, or red sumac, the delightful part of them is the berries. I'm gonna go ahead and, so, yeah, there are no interactions with this. So there shouldn't be a problem unless anyone's like allergic to sumac, which would be really weird. So, disclaimer, I can't know everyone's allergies, but there's very unlikely.
I gathered some sumac a couple of months ago. It was really good. The redder the berries, the better it tastes.
Yeah, this one's a little mild. I think it might have rained a little bit too soon because most of the flavor is on the outside of the berry. And so, go ahead and just...
Hibiscus kind of.
Yeah, a little bit of hibiscus. It's fruity. It's also got lemon. And so this is one of my favorite flavors, honestly. And this is a kind of middling potency. If you get the really potent ones, the lemon is really kicky, really kicky. Also, this is a little bit diluted because the seed is also edible, but the seed itself is left in there, which is good. But that's for people who like it to have a little moderation on the flavor. But sumac is such a wonderful plant. I call it diabetic's delight. Sumac is excellent for blood sugar control. It helps move blood sugar down. And so when it's in season and you can get your hands on it, this is a delicious way to go ahead and moderate some of your blood sugar needs. It also helps lower cholesterol. That one's a little bit more mild as far as I understand. I haven't used it to try and lower cholesterol specifically, extensively. I understand it's more on the blood sugar side, but there is a little bit there. One of the favorite ways to use sumac, once you identify it, it's got those wings down the middle of the stem. It's also got leaves that come off. These are leaflets, technically, because all of this together, this whole thing I'm holding, is one leaf.
Oh.
And then all of these are called leaflets, and this came off of the main stem. And so if we had the main stem here, this would look like this. One, and then the other, and then the other, and then the other. So it's an alternate, it alternates one after the other, leafing plant. Not opposite. They don't come out across from each other. They're alternate. Some people get tricked by the leaflets, which are coming off across from each other. We call that pinnate, and it's just a leaf that's lost a lot of the bits in between that leaves little leaflets instead. But sumac has seen some use here in the US. Herbalists' favorite way to use it is they go out with a pitcher of water, and they find one, they tap it a few times to get the bugs to fly off, and then they pretend that they were never there. And then they dip the sumac berry head after several sunny days and no rain into the pitcher of water, and then they just leave it there for a good half hour. They'll shake it a little bit, or they'll snip it off and take it inside. And they shake it. On the berries, there are these little hairs. And those hairs are actually little tubes, if I recall correctly, where the acids come out. Malic acid, acetic acid, and citric acid, maybe ascorbic acid. There were like 4 different acids. Forgive me if I get one of them in there that wasn't there. But anyway, malic is definitely there. And so you get all these different mouth-puckering acids that are just so sour. And they're on the outside of the berry. And so if you put it into water, it washes those off. And they go into the water. And those have health properties. And they taste wonderful, so they call it sumac lemonade. Throw in a little bit of stevia, and it's refreshing. You can do it on a hiking trip, too. You can get a more powerful lemonade by grinding the berries down, because there is some acid inside the berries, and sometimes there's a lot. Sometimes you get lucky, and it's like, whoo, that's powerful. And you can dilute that down a lot and have it last you a long time. There's a little bit of a process to it, but this, just be warned, the berries are like plums in the sense that they have a pit. Or cherries, don't bite the pit, it will break your teeth. So, if you blend the pit down and your blender's tough enough to go ahead and break the pit, that's fine. Just don't break your teeth on it, it's edible. Just don't break your teeth on it. So sumac lemonade, lovely, delicious, anti-inflammatory. Helps glutathione get built back up because of the vitamin C. But we don't use it nearly we aren't the ones who use it the most extensive by any stretch of the imagination. Sumac is the secret ingredient all around the Mediterranean Sea. Every Mediterranean mother, it seems, has a secret recipe for a spice mix called za'atar. And in that, the star ingredient that they don't tell anyone else, but everyone knows, is sumac. So za'atar, if you've ever had shawarma, if you've ever had Mediterranean food of any kind, if you've ever had, well, maybe not baklava, but that's a dessert. But 3/4 of Mediterranean food, I'm throwing out a number from nowhere, a lot of it has za'atar spice, and I love that. And the star of that is sumac. It's got this fruity, citrusy, zipping flavor. And they use it on meats and fishes and fish dishes and salads, falafel, and it's just delicious. So all around the Mediterranean Sea, it's harvested and it is used in day-to-day cooking. And so they get these health properties in their day-to-day lives. Some people wonder why the USA's health is kind of not super high compared to how much we spend. We actually, I don't want to say that out loud, it feels so bad, but compared to how much we spend on health versus how much benefit we get out of it, we're kind of on the bottom of the list for per dollar health. At least from the countries that were on that list, which was most of them. But so we're not very efficient. One of the things I think is that we've taken out a lot of these foods that are just delicious and nutritious, and we've narrowed it down to like our favorite 6 vegetables, and that's it.
And
you
we're
know?
also putting the poison on them.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. That really doesn't help. I have an entire 2-hour lecture about that. So yeah, I don't disagree with you. We put bad stuff in and we take good stuff out, and then we cook the good stuff that's left. So, work on one of those, I guess, to start with. But I've wondered if sumac and things like that, we see the Asian population, Asian ethnic cooking, I should say, they use things like perilla, and they age a little more gracefully than we do, if I can say that. And then Mediterranean, they seem to, age a little better than we do too, in my opinion. And they have sumac, which is really anti-inflammatory, and it's in everything. And then we have us, and what do we put on everything? Salt, that's our herb. So, sumac, I've got a little recipe that you guys are welcome to come up and take a picture of on how to make za'atar spice mix. This is just one of many recipes, and I can recommend it. Now, the cool thing about sumac is that its berries, they don't disappear. The wildlife doesn't really eat them. They desiccate, they dry over time, and eventually they lose their flavor, but I think we're still able to get some that have some flavor. We're on the tail end. And so if you find some of those, they come in, I'm gonna come around with a picture of the berries again, since I don't have a berry stalk, I didn't have one near my house. They're kind of a pyramid in shape. The whole cluster of berries form kind of a pyramid.
Can I see a little closer?
Sure. And they come off the end of a main branch. They're not like 14 coming off the sides. 14 little clusters coming off the sides. A little pyramid there. The rest of the plant we don't really use. So it's mainly just the berries. You'll also notice that sumac has this beautiful multicolored thing going on, especially as it gets further in. The chlorophyll in the plant is hiding the red that is always there. And so as the chlorophyll, the chloroplasts, the green things, are no longer needed through the winter and die back, the red is revealed. And once it gets completely dry, it's virtually completely red. And so don't get confused about what plant it is or if it's diseased or something. That's the thing that does. So those are some of the cool things about sumac. Any questions?
Yeah, do you know if smooth sumac and fragrant sumac can be, do they have the same hairs? Can you make the drink and?
Good question. I want to say smooth sumac, yes. Fragrant sumac I haven't looked up, so I can't say one way or the other, but my gut instinct, which I would get 2 sources for before I used it, would be yes. From everything I've read, they tend to just be grouped together and kind of in a similar use family. And staghorn sumac, definitely. That one's actually the one that's most commonly used. So
when I gathered the sumac and I made my tea, you know,
yeah.
my wife, I get a whole bunch and my wife made a gallon of tea. Okay. So after I drank it, I didn't go back because I knew it'd take a bunch of more berries to make the tea.
Mm.
So I should have ground them up and made, and yeah. So how much would you need? Would you need if you're taking it for a year, would you need a quart?
Well, that depends on how much you like it. I put this stuff on like anything. I gave way too much of it away. My sister-in-law down in Texas, as like a deep heartfelt gift, I gave her a container about yay large, which was probably several clusters worth.
Right.
And she went through the whole thing. She loves to barbecue, and she's like, "Do you have any more?" And the answer was, "No, I've given too much away already." And I ran out. Oh my gosh, I used that on potatoes, I used it on rice, I used it on fish, I used it on everything. It was great.
Do you go online?
Hmm?
You ever buy it online?
You can. I haven't done that yet, just because I expected this year's harvest to be as good as last year,
Yeah,
and it wasn't. At my area, I got like nothing. This was actually a gift from someone who was very kind and knew that my heart was breaking, probably. So this, I have shared all I'm going to. Don't ask. But yeah, how much do you need? I mean, if you're gonna be making a drink with it, I would say probably half a teaspoon per glass if you want it to be punchy. But it depends on how potent your mix is, whether or not the seeds were filtered out. If you use a sieve that seeds can't go through and you can mash the pulp through and keep the seeds out, you can get seedless. And that'll be a little bit more punchy. I actually like to do that. And then all the seeds and a little bit of pulp that's left behind, I'll use that to make the lemonade, and I'll use the pure pulp as my seasoning.
That's one of the best drinks I've drank.
It's so good.
Oh, yes, it's just excellent.
Yeah, and so it would be nice to be able to have it year round. And it can get really sour. Some other people in the house didn't think they liked it because my first batch with them was
What's it doing right now?
concentrated.
What's it doing right now? I haven't been out. in a month.
Right now, it's on its way to turn red. This is actually recent right here. And you've
there
probably got a few
berries?
more weeks. The berries are still on the edge of good, but they're gonna be gone in the next,
Well, they
within a
lasted
month.
this long.
Hmm?
I picked it about 2 months ago, so they've been berries for 2 months.
Yeah, this is on where it's starting to get weaker, but you can still get something out of it. So earlier you get the berries, the more potent, but they still have something to them.
Yeah.
So this is probably the last couple weeks though.
I see them all around the plants, but I haven't seen any berries.
I know, this year has been really, I've seen a few, because I've been keeping my eye out. I almost made us do a U-turn off of a highway. Oh my gosh! And it's like, can't harness those anyway. Learn your lesson. Those are by a highway. But, yeah. Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me thrice, and I'm just, it means I like punishment. But, yeah, they just haven't done super well this year. I don't know what's up. Usually they're a yearly thing, I thought. So they weren't in Arizona, so this is my hands-on. I've only been here a year and a half, 2 years now. But, well, I'll close up on the plants. Last thing, I'm going to tell you about a couple cool events that are coming up, and then I'll let you guys go. Hostage situation resolved. So this, and events that aren't happening, this is the last plant seminar for the year. There aren't very many plants to talk about for the next little while. There are a few, and I did indoor plants last year, but it helps to give a little bit of a break. So we're going to take a break on these until February. February, I'll be back, and assuming that we continue to have people coming, then we'll continue doing them. So that's announcement number one. Announcement number two, I have opened a third cohort because I had some people asking for the herbalism class. It will start in March, and so there is a wait list if you're like, you just want to have it in your mind and get a reminder, or you can pre-order it as well on my website. You can find the website on the cards. That herbalism class is an 8-session class over 8 months, and we will go over safety, of course, but we'll also go over natural remedies, oils, infusions, tinctures, and most importantly, how to think like an herbalist so you're not just putting random plants together and hoping that the blog was correct. And so, some of the things I teach in that class can make quite a difference in a home. So, that's one thing that's on the website. The other thing, and this is a new one, and I'm excited because I'm a nerd, and I hope you are too. It's a little bit farther away than I usually want to do, but there is a literary, sort of Victorian-themed fair going on down in Durant, Oklahoma. That's like 3 hours, 3.5, maybe not 3.5 for you guys, 3.5 for me, hours away. And there's going to be live music, and I like poetry reading. I know that's not everyone's top of the list, but there's going to be some authors who are reading their books, but there's also going to be a lot of holistic crafts and booths. And I've been invited to go there, and I'm going to do my October version of myself, where you're going to see me as a crazy herbalist from the back. I'm going to say, cures for what ails thee, and it'll be great. And I will have a few things that I haven't done before. I'll have a natural remedies booklet that has a few natural remedies in there that are really effective at home. I'll also have some plant PDFs like these so that you can see. I don't lay out all the ones that I have because that means I have to remember to print them, honestly. But you'll be able to have these identification sheets. And so those are some there. And then I'll also be giving special discounts for anyone who buys a scroll, that inside the scroll has a certificate for a visit if you have any health issues that you need taken care of. And also for education things. There's one last event, and it's one of those education things. I have an inflammation causes and solutions, common causes and solutions online class. This is a one session class for 2 hours. It's not live, but it goes over a lot of very good information. And I had one lady, I've done it once before, and I had one lady who went to that. She applied what she learned there, and she'd been having pain in her hands for I don't know how long, because she didn't say that in the email, but it sounded like a long time. And she did some of the action steps that I say at the end, where it's like, here are the dozen things, don't do all, pick one at a time, and here are the ones that I think are the most important. She picked one, and she made that one change, and the pain in her hands went away
Nice.
as her inflammation went down. So these things work. And so that's the last event offering, which will be up on my website soon. And it will be at your own pace. I send you a link to the special class, and it's got 2 hours and a handout, and it teaches you how you can battle inflammation at home. No, I don't think there are any supplements. There might be one supplement mentioned on the side, but it's not like the main thing is supplements. It's how do you do this with how you live your life. So those are the cool things I've got coming up. Hopefully you think they're cool. If not, then onward a different direction. But that's what I got for you guys today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When is that festival?
The
Yeah.
festival is the 26th of October, starting at 2 p.m.
This
down in
fall.
Durant.